Welcome to episode number 287 of Goulet Q&A. I'm Brian Goulet, and what can I say? Fountain pens are still a thing. I'm here from Goulet Pens to share this meticulously slapdash and succinctly rambling video where I take your fountain pen, ink, and paper questions and answer them as only someone who's devoted an unreasonable amount of their lives to fountain pens could do. Lives? I guess I have more than one life? No, just one. My life to fountain pens. Anyway, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about Fountain Pen Day because it's Fountain Pen Day when I'm publishing this. Yay! Friday, November 1st this year. It's always the first Friday of November. We just kind of made it up as a holiday in the fountain pen world, but it's just when we celebrate fountain pens because they're awesome and using them and sharing them with others. We're going to talk about inexpensive pens with good ink capacity, why manufacturers are cutting back on high-end ballpoint pens, because I'm an expert on that. Good cards for cataloging ink. Dry writing, LAMY joy. Why some inks cling to the sides of their sample vials. And is that a problem? Workhorse pens that can survive being uncapped overnight. And the learning curve for getting into gold nib pens. I'll also talk a little bit about some of my recent personal adventures. So if anybody's been missing that, I have some adventures to share. And I have a fun fact and a writing prompt for you today. I thought I would go a little nuts because it is Fountain Pen Day. So why not share a little more? I do want to talk about Fountain Pen Day. So normally I do like the feedback stuff, and then I get into some more like the Goulet Pens company stuff. But I'll just go ahead and get right into it because it's timely, right? So we at Goulet Pens are celebrating Fountain Pen Day, obviously, on the Friday, but we're running some deals through the weekend while supplies last, kind of a thing. So, you know, there is timeliness to this. So make sure you work on over to our site, but you don't have to like stop the video right away, you know, but that's okay. If you're really that excited about it, my retention rate can just go down the toilet. That's fine. As long as you're enjoying and loving some pens today, that's really all that matters. But there's a lot of different stuff that we have going on. Some of it's like, you know, really specific, so I won't cover everything, but we got 25% off all ink samples, including sample package sets, 20% off select Benu Euphorias, a bunch of them. We got 20% off our Colorverse Witch by Moonlight. That is our exclusive color. 30% off the Conklin Durograph Whirlwinds. We got our Endless Explorer journal that is on sale. Esterbrook Camden's on sale. Ferris Wheel Press Blue Legacy Ink Carriage. These things are kind of neat. 20% off all Goulet nibs. 25% off our ink sample vial holder. 50% off Goulet stickers. 30% off select Goulet notebooks. 20% off Magna Carta Mag 600. 30% off Monograppa Elmo. And just all kinds of other stuff. I won't even get into it all, but we have a gift with purchase. You buy a Pilot Explorer and you get a free Metropolitan ballpoint, which I know it's a ballpoint, but you can give it to somebody else. It's okay. Or, you know, use a decent ballpoint. We actually have a question about ballpoints today. So, and then we still have the deal with the all the Jaffa brands, which if you buy any of their pens, you know, Delta, Diplomat, Conklin, Monteverde, Peniter, then you get a free 30 ml bottle of Private Reserve Infinity ink. So that's kind of cool. We got a bunch of other stuff, so just go on over to our site. We'll link to the sale page in the description if you don't already have a link to it. And another thing, for those of you who are in daylight savings time, we are falling back this Sunday. So be aware of that, November 3rd. Change your clocks. You get an extra hour of sleep. Woo! And it's going to be like dark when I finish work here in the afternoons. It's like womp womp. But it'll be a little lighter in the morning, I guess. Anyway, don't forget that. You get an extra hour. That's a thing. All right, now let's get into some feedback, okay? Got a lot of good feedback. Y'all have been providing me some great comments, great feedback in the YouTube comments. I'm really enjoying those, so thank you. Burnham says, great episode, Brian. I really like the questions that allow us to see you handle the pens because I find the hobby to be very visual and tactile. Well, you know what? I went through and I had some questions that I could have just answered today where I didn't have to show my hands, but I'm going to show them anyway. So I got two questions for you that I'm going to be showing my hands. It is a little extra work to do that, but if y'all like it, I'll keep doing it. All right. Name Like Nobody Else says, Franklin Christoph, Goulet Pens Collab Dream Pen would be the Model 2 glass look in Goulet Cobalt Blue. So Franklin Christoph, I asked about, what would you want to see us offer if we expanded Franklin Christoph offering. That glass finish that they have is pretty neat, but in like a Goulet Blue. Yeah, I could see that. And then we got some other feedback too. Hoosier Roulanger, I don't know if I said that right, but I have 2 Franklin Christoph pens, a 45L and a Model 20 Pocket. They become my favorites. Would love to see a Model 20 Franklin Christoph Goulet collaboration. And then some other people, Model 45 and 66 from Updaisy. And then Name Like Nobody Else wants a Model 2 in Goulet Cobalt Blue. Oh, I already mentioned that. Whoops. There you go. I'm the one doing all this. So, yeah. So good feedback. Got a bunch of other people weighing in. Franklin Christoph has a lot of models. And it was kind of spread all over the place. I was like, cool. So everybody just wants everything. Awesome. Anyway, it's not even happening in the immediate term, so we'll see. I'll keep it in mind for the future, though. And then we got some feedback on notebooks, too, right? How many notebooks are you actively using? A bunch of y'all commented. It's pretty awesome. And I don't know. A lot of people have a lot of notebooks going on. Lucio says, I have 3 notebooks for work, 1 for notes at home, and 2 for journaling. So 6, I guess. 7 notebooks seemed like a lot when I heard the question, but now I kind of just want an extra notebook. So they already had 6. And then the Ormonds said 1 for meetings, 1 planner, 1 pocket, 1 for work, 1 for various notes, 1 business, 1 drawing, and a bunch of old half-filled ones. So 7 active. Another 7. And then Johan says, I use different notebooks and pads for different purposes. I would say that I have 3 to 4 in active use most of the time. Starting a new notebook is always such a delight. Combination of trepidation and expectation. There you go. So a lot of people using multiple notebooks for different purposes. So we're in good company. That's kind of cool. Then we got Jeffrey Hall says that, hey, Brian, thanks for your answer to my question on finding the replacement Yovo feeds that I answered last week. We'll check those out. We'll check out those Edison units for sure. Oddly enough, I was trying to replace a nib unit on a Conklin pen, which I talked about, and the Yovo style nib unit did not fit. Yes. Imagine that. So I put the new nib and feed in the Conklin unit and was all good since the nib and feed were Yovo compatible, even if the unit was not. Yes. So that is a quirk. If you're not familiar with that. So Yovo does make the nibs for Conklin and Monteverde, but they were previously using the Bach housings, which annoyingly enough, the threads on those housings are different pitch for Bach and for Yovo. So they are not cross-compatible. Even though they're basically the same size, you can't thread them into each other. So you can't take a Bach nib unit and put it on a pen that was made for Yovo. So when they changed over to Yovo-made nibs, they would have had to retool every single pen that they have. And then if they went with the Yovo thread pitch on the nib unit, then they would, not be backwards compatible anymore. It would have been hard to service old stuff. So they decided to just take, the nib and the feed and use that in their old housing that was still compatible with all the pens. So it's stuff like this that makes it where I get questions like this and I'm like, well, it depends because, yes, Yovo makes them, but Yovo makes a lot of different things and they make them to specifications. So just because it's Yovo doesn't mean it's compatible with all other Yovo made things. It gets confusing for all of us, users, end users, but that's all right. You can still, worst comes to worst, if you got a Bach and a Yovo, as long as it's the right size, number 6 or whatever, you can pull it out of the housing and swap it around like that. All right. Hey, it's CT says, thanks for the info on the ultrasonic cleaner. I would like a video on how you use it, but mainly if there are items that you should not put in such a device. So yeah, I'm definitely I want to make a video on it at some point. I'm honestly just not that much of an expert on it. So I'll do it, but I just understand a lot of people may not have them or just curious about them. So I'll think about that. I really will. I'm not aware of anything that's going to be harmed in an ultrasonic cleaner per se. I think that's some of the point is that it's supposed to be pretty gentle. In my experience, the only kind of annoying thing that happens when you use an ultrasonic cleaner on pens is if you have any pens that have, like a demonstrator where it's got, like an inner cap seal, like this TWSBI Go here. If I was to put this whole cap, if I had ink all up inside of here and I put this cap in an ultrasonic cleaner, it would, it's like using ultrasonic frequencies to whatever, shake it or whatever. Some of that ink and water and stuff would work its way behind that cap seal. So it would actually make that look worse. So when there's things like that, when there's parts of the pen where, it's kind of like sealed off, or if you're like taking converters and you're putting them in, if you have a regular converter, this one's visual. This is a big TWSBI swipe converter. Normally all the ink and stuff stays on the bottom of the seal here. But if I was to take and put this whole thing in ultrasonic cleaner, the water would work its way back through here, and I would end up with water behind the piston seal. That could be annoying if your converter does not disassemble. So, most converters, if they can't be disassembled, I wouldn't put in ultrasonic cleaner. And, any caps that have those inner cap seals and stuff like that can get annoying as well. Those are the only things that it doesn't really hurt anything, I guess, but especially in a demonstrator can be annoying. So that's the only thing I'm aware of, but, maybe I'll do some tests and try to learn more about that and do a video at some point. Yeah. And then last feedback I have is from In-Out 3x3. I used to use and buy syringe filters in bulk. So this is a question last week about being able to filter out shimmer from a shimmering ink. They said, I don't recommend syringe filters for shimmer inks. That's going to cost a lot since you would clog it very fast and have to switch filters. So they were like $5 a pop as I was shopping around. Maybe you can get them cheaper if you buy them in bulk or whatever. But if you can't even use the whole filter, or if you use more than one filter on a single bottle of ink, wow, that really would take forever, or cost a lot. Also, imagine squirting it on your face when you try to apply too much pressure. Oh yeah, like if you ever use a bulb syringe when you're trying to clean it, at the sink or whatever, and you don't have it sealed quite all the way, and it's like gets water all up in your face. That could happen. I think if you want to do it scientifically, I would use a centrifuge, shimmer on the bottom, and just syringe the top clean ink. So yeah, that is definitely an option. I may have mentioned that, I'm not sure, but just out of curiosity, I looked at how much centrifuges cost, and they are not practical. Exceder.com did a blog post. That's like a brand, I guess, that makes centrifuges. Their benchtop centrifuges cost between $1,000 and $5,000. Those are the cheapest they have. So yeah, I can't imagine in what scenario that would make sense for anyone to buy for this purpose. But I guess if you're already like a lab tech and you have access to one, why not? Give it a try. But it did make me think though, well, a centrifuge, all it's doing is like, basically getting the shimmer to be away from the rest of the ink. And then if you're syringing off the rest of the ink, my thought, I didn't have time to try this before the video, but my thought was if you were to just let the ink sit there for a while, like weeks, and let all the shimmer stuff settle out, and then you just syringe off the stuff off the top really gently so you're not disturbing what's on the bottom, you would at least have a lot of shimmer that's not in there anymore. May not get everything out, but that is by far the cheapest option and simplest, really. I got shimmering bottles of ink. I may test this out. I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't gotten asked this a lot, but now I'm just curious. I have a lot of bottles of ink over here in my shelf area that a lot of them have shimmer in it, and they've been sitting there for quite some time. So I don't know. I may have to give that a shot. I'm curious. But anyway, that's what we got for feedback this week. Let's get into some questions, shall we? First question I have is from Katie on YouTube. Question, I'm looking for 2 pens that I can take to the office and not mind if I leave somewhere at a copier or somewhere where I'll not remember. My criteria is price, obviously, and it holds a good amount of ink, since I'd rather not have to deal with refilling too often or using ink cartridges. TWSBI is one option. I'd rather not a Chinese knockoff type, as I want a good quality pen. Also, I'm not thinking of the budget line Platinum, etc. I'm not a fan of the Safari either. Sorry, I was going to go with the Pilot Metropolitan, but it really doesn't hold a lot of ink. Any good suggestions? Thanks. Well, I do have some suggestions. And I was just going to shoot it like normal, but I was like, you know what? Let me get you some hand shots because I got all these pens and I want to show you some of the options. So let's do that. So you mentioned the Pilot Metropolitan, right? So this is a good pen. I mean, this would be a great one. It's very office appropriate, right? Durable, all that kind of stuff. You mentioned it not having a high ink capacity. That's kind of true. The little Con B converter that it comes with, it's not terrible ink capacity. It's as decent as any converter that you'll get, really. If you wanted to go this route, you can just fill the cartridge. I just had it. Here it is. So you can just fill the cartridge which is, you know, about the size of the converter, but you don't have all the extra stuff going on inside of there. You're going to get a higher ink capacity here. So with the converter that it comes with, you can max out between the ink that's in the feed system and the converter. It's about 0.82 milliliters. We've got this on our site. We've measured it all. It's not a terrible ink capacity, but you can get 1.1 milliliters if you just refill the cartridge. So it doesn't really cost you anything. Comes with a cartridge, so you can just refill the one that it comes with. You know, just use your little ink syringe, you know, that kind of deal. You just fill it right out of the bottle. I'm not sure I need to demonstrate this, but you know how it works. You fill from the bottle and then stick it right in there, put it in your pen, and you're good to go. So that is a very viable option. I think that's a decent, it's not a huge ink capacity, but it's a really good pen, and you know, would definitely be an option for you if you had your heart set on a Metropolitan. Let's see here, what else we got. The Pilot Kakuno. So that's kind of the same deal. So if you got a Kakuno, it's a little less expensive actually. You're looking at $14.30 for this. Cool little pen, you know, no clip or anything, but if that's okay, you know, it writes really well. Same nib that's on the Metropolitan, except it has little faces on them. You can do the same thing though. You can use the converter. You can use a cartridge. It looks like it should be able to eyedropper convert, but it has holes in the back here. So that will not be an option unless you makeshift some way to plug up those holes. That's totally up to you. A little two-part epoxy probably would do that, but you're doing that at your own risk, obviously. Yeah, so that's an option too. That doesn't get you any more ink capacity than the Metropolitan, but it is less expensive. And the cool thing about the Kakuno is it will take, well, okay, so you got your little Con B converter. That's the one that comes with the Metropolitan. You got your Con 40. That's normally what's an add-on for the Pilot stuff, or it comes with like the vanishing point and stuff. This is the Con 70. So you get a higher ink capacity with the Con 70, and it will fit in the Kakuno. So you can get a higher ink capacity with this cartridge without having to eyedropper or deal with the, you know, syringe filling or anything like that. And with that, you get a higher ink capacity. So I forget what the ink capacity is. I think it's like close to 1.3 milliliters. So not too shabby. However, the converter basically costs as much as the pen. So maybe that's not the route you want to go. So I got another option for you if you want to stay in the Pilot family. Explorer, right? So the Explorer, pretty decent looking pen, pretty light, pretty, you know, workable, same nib and feed and everything on these other Pilots. This one will take a Con 70 as well as all the other things. You can refill cartridges with that and so on. Ta-da! But with this one, you can eyedropper fill it. Now, they don't advertise it as that, and technically it is like a two-part thing here, so I don't know. I wouldn't like super guarantee, but like I think it's glued in place. I've eyedropper filled several of these and never had an issue. So I would feel pretty comfortable saying it's most likely going to work. It's something you could try at least. And that, I don't have measurements for how much ink that holds, but it's going to be several milliliters. That would be a huge ink capacity. So if you're not like bombing around everywhere, carrying it, throwing around your bag and stuff like that, if it's just going to be a desk pen, I would eyedropper convert this thing. You know, worst case, you get a little ink that comes out of there and you just wipe it off and dump out the ink and don't eyedropper convert it anymore. But that is an option. These are $25, so it's about the same price as the Metropolitan, but you get the higher ink capacity. So that's kind of neat. Let's see here. What else we got? TWSBI. You mentioned TWSBI as well. I got several options for TWSBI. So TWSBI Eco or an Eco T are going to be some of your more affordable options. I think these are great pens for the purpose that you're talking about. This would probably be my number one recommendation as a balance for affordable pen. Looks really nice at the office. Can use it. Huge ink capacity. Starts reliably. All that kind of stuff. You know, you can see this is what it looks like with ink in it. This is the indigo blue one. This one's a little more expensive because it's like a premium trim and stuff like that. But I don't remember the last time I filled this pen. It has been months. And I keep it as just like I'm not using this every single day, but I use it, you know, definitely periodically. It's always inked up, ready to go. So that's a good one just to have on hand, especially if you want to use a couple different pens. Eco is a really, really good option for you. Those run about $33 and you get 1.76 milliliters ink capacity right off the bat. Other TWSBI, the Swipe. So the Swipe is kind of neat. You know, it's similar in size, kind of to the Explorer. Pretty light pen, but it comes with a bunch of different filling options. So you get this like push converter, which has a pretty big ink capacity. You also have your traditional, pull or whatever twist converter, which comes with it as well. And I know you're not into cartridges. TWSBI made their own cartridges here, and they're massive. So you get a big ink capacity with these cartridges. Just not a lot of ink choices there, but you could refill these too. So that's an option. I don't know if these are. If you want to test if a decent test if something is going to be eyedropper compatible or not, if you just kind of blow on the back of the pen, like wrap your lips around it, get a good seal and try blowing. If no air is coming through, then you're like, the back of that pen is sealed. I have never tested that, but I think you could eyedropper convert or swipe. That would be my guess. If you've ever done that, let me know in the comments. Some silicone grease on here, maybe an O-ring too, because these threads are not super, super tight. And then you could eyedropper convert this thing and get several milliliters of ink. That would be a huge ink capacity. That's a decent option, and the swipe is cheap. The swipe is only $27. So you get 1.46 milliliters with the converter, and then 1.65 milliliters with the converters, and you get 5.5 milliliters if you fill the body of the pen, which is pretty crazy. You get a lot of stuff going on there. And then the TWSBI Go is another one. So this is a even more affordable pen. This is only 19 bucks. And the ink capacity on this one, it is a like push piston filler. You get 1.6 milliliters of ink, which is pretty big. That's as big as you get with pretty much any piston filling pen. So not a bad option as well. It looks a little more, juvenile, I guess, than maybe some of these other options. I think the Eco, honestly, is a really good option for you. So there you go. That's what I got. No, wait, I got some others. Let's see here. I think another good option too would be Pilot Varsity, right? You can buy them in a 7-pack for the price of, basically any of these. They are technically disposable, but you can actually refill them. I have a video on how to do that. It's a hack, but it can be done. They come preloaded with ink. They're basically like an eyedropper fill. It's comes with decent ink capacity. It's actually not the whole body that's filled with ink. It only goes up to about here, funny enough. But it writes really well. They're like less than $4 a piece. If you lose it around the office, who cares? If somebody's like, hey, that's kind of neat, you can be like, keep it. Really cool pen to carry around just to be like, hey, here's a fountain pen, try it. You get different colors and stuff like that. So this, I think, is actually not a bad option if you're okay with the style and all that kind of stuff. And you can buy individual colors too. You don't have to buy the 7-pack. And then we got the Kaweco Classic Sport. Now this color we don't have anymore. This was the Ice Sport from back in the day. Does not have a huge ink capacity with its standard international short cartridge, but these are really good candidates for eyedropper compatibility. Really fine threads, little silicone grease on there, and you're good to go. And then you get almost 3 milliliter ink capacity in this tiny little compact pen. So under 30 bucks for the pen. Not a bad option. So that's kind of cool. And then last but not least, I don't know where the pen was. I guess I didn't actually grab it. Was the Kaweco Perkeo. So that one, I guess I will show a picture instead because I didn't get it. But that one takes the standard international short or standard international long cartridge, which is kind of cool. So that's a higher ink capacity. You get almost 1.7 milliliters with that. And if you use a standard international converter, because most Kawecos, the smaller ones, the sports, they don't take the longer converters, but the Perkeo does. That you get 1.14 milliliters. But unfortunately, like the Kakuno, it's got holes in the back, so you cannot eyedropper fill that one. Otherwise, that would be pretty amazing too. But it's a decent pen, and it's only 18 bucks. So lots of good options for you here. Hopefully one of these rings your bell, and yeah, it's kind of cool. Next question. This is from Paul McHugh. I know the discussions are about fountain pens, but I have a question. Have manufacturers of higher-end pens stopped making ballpoint pens? Many of my pens are ballpoints. They were de rigueur when I worked in an office, means like standard, normal, courteous. When I worked in an office, and I would always travel with Visconti, Delta, Pelican, and the like ballpoint pens. Recently, I have not seen new models made into ballpoints. Well, I'm not the best one to ask about this, but I will share what my thoughts are at least. I don't keep tabs very well on what comes in ballpoint and what doesn't, because we don't really do anything in ballpoint, especially on the high-end stuff. It's just not our crowd. We are a fountain pen, like through and through, fountain pen company. We have a couple of roller balls, but we really, other than the deal we have right now with the free ballpoint Metro that comes with the Explorers, we don't actually sell. Well, I guess that's a free one, so we don't actually sell any ballpoints. So I'm not the most knowledgeable, so I'm gonna have to speculate just a little bit. But my guess is that there's a couple of different factors here. It could be that maybe they are making them, but specialized retailers like us may not stock them as much, just because, like we focus on fountain pens. So if Delta or Visconti or whoever was to make a ballpoint, we wouldn't list it on our site. You wouldn't know that they made it unless you followed somebody else who did carry the ballpoints. So it could be that. It could be that, specialized retailers are maybe not carrying the ballpoints as much. I don't know. We never have, so I don't really know. But it could also be, maybe they are just making fewer ballpoints. I don't know. They could be cutting back, maybe because the demand is not there as much. I could see maybe that being the case. If people are going to spend a certain amount on a pen, maybe they're like, well, I might as well just get the roller ball or the ballpoint. And also the roller balls and the fountain pens tend to be more similar in design. It's usually just kind of like the grip section that's a little different. Typically with ballpoints, you end up with some kind of like twisting end that, the ballpoint retracts in and out. I'm trying to find an example. I'm looking around my desk and I'm like, I don't have any ballpoints anywhere. It's just not how I live my life. But anyway, the roller balls and the fountain pens are usually like you remove the cap and screw it on the back. So there's usually like a little bit of different R&D, a little bit of different design that comes into it. So it could be that maybe if they're, just not investing in all the different modes, same thing with pencils too. Pencils are kind of its own thing. So it might be if they're like just specializing more in like roller balls and fountains, that they're like not focusing as much on ballpoints and pencils. I don't know. That would be interesting to ask some things, but I'm sure there's additional costs with developing each different mode. I think, and then, my last thought was like, it might be more of a demand thing, right? I know that like just in general, like gel roller ball pens are way more popular these days than they used to be, as the reliability of them has gotten up and, different ink technology and stuff like that's developed. So I think it's much more of a standard to use gel roller balls instead of ballpoints as a whole. So it could just be that just over years of that developing, maybe as people are getting into high-end pens, the demand is more on the roller ball side as opposed to a ballpoint. So I don't really know. All these are different things. I don't keep tabs on the ballpoints, but some of you all might have somewhat more of an idea and have some insights. So if you do, please comment. Let Paul know what's going on here. I'm kind of curious myself too. Next one we have is, oh boy, I'll just say Kamer. I've started my own ink collection. Any suggestions for a plain index card that is a fountain ink friendly, or at least a card that is about the size of a business card that is just plain, no holes? So no like coloring that we have. We have like ink swatch cards and stuff like that, but they've got designs on them. Sounds like you just want plain, thick cards that are good for fountain pen ink. Says, I want to start swatches, but I don't want the paper to have any designs whatsoever. Cool. So it sounds like what you want is like just a really high quality card stock, basically. There could be some brands out there that make this kind of stuff that would be good for you that I may not know about. So this is where like other people in the comments may have some ideas for you. Also there, I would just like go on YouTube and just Google like ink swatch cards or fountain pen ink cards or something like that. Maybe you can stumble across some people who've done this in like a crafty type scenario. But I know that we use this type of stuff when we do our ink swatches, like our ink swabs for the swab shop and stuff like that online. We use just plain cardstock from Clairefontaine. It's part of their pollen collection. It's the 210 gram weight cardstock, and it's smooth. It's not like the absolute most fountain pen friendly. I mean, it's very fountain pen friendly, but it's not like Tomoe River type stuff. So like it doesn't show like the shading and stuff. as much as it could on some other papers, but for cardstock, it's pretty darn good. It's about the equivalent to 74-pound cardstock, like cover cardstock. So you could also go to like an Office Max or Staples or Office Depot, something like that, and you could just go and look at cover cardstock. Look at something around that thickness. Go for something super smooth. Usually the kind of paper, if you're not buying it like from a specialized fountain pen retailer, if you go for like laser printer paper, that will be typically more fountain pen friendly than inkjet paper, because inkjet paper uses inkjet ink, and inkjet ink absorbs into the paper, whereas laser printers print onto the surface of the paper, so they usually make them smoother, have more sizing, and it's a little more fountain pen friendly. So a little fun fact for you, if you're out there in the wild shopping for just reams of paper or cardstock or whatever, go for stuff that's made for lasers. And it's usually gonna have the word premium or something in there too. Basically, when it comes to paper, the more money you spend, you'll get a better quality paper. So you can check that out. The pollen cardstock that we use for our swabs, it's not something that we stock regularly. I can't remember if we ever sold it at some point. I want to say we offered it at some point like 6 or 8 or 10 years ago. It just wasn't that popular, if I remember correctly. I could just be making that up though. I don't know if we've ever sold it. I have no idea. But either way, we don't sell it now, so it must not have been that popular if we did sell it. But yeah, that's also out there. I mean, we buy it from our supplier, which is, Clairefontaine. It's all distributed through Exiclair in the US. And you can, you can find anybody who sells Clairefontaine. Just look up Clairefontaine pollen cardstock. And you might be able to find it like some art supply stores or something like that. That's the stuff we use. And that stuff is really decent. And you can get it in like half sheets, full sheets, and just kind of cut it down yourself. That is easily, I can recommend. We don't sell it, but it'd be an easy recommend. Other things that we offer though, we have Exacompta cards, which Exacompta is under the Clairefontaine umbrella of brands. So those cards are pretty decent as well. We have 3x5 and we have 4x6. So size-wise, you're talking about business cards. Business cards are usually 2" by 3.5. So if you get a 3x5, it's not quite going to be that. You could get like a 2x3, out of a 3x5, or a 4x6. You can get like you can get 4 2x3s out of a 4x6. That would be a good way to do it, but it's not going to be like standard business card size. So if you want standard business card size, you need to get like more like full sheets and stuff like that. Those would be my recommendations. Sorry, I don't have like a ton of options there for you. The other thing I will say, this is not what you were asking for, but for anybody else who's out there looking to do like ink cataloging, a relatively newer product that we have from Wearingle is the Ink Color Swatch A5 notebook. It's got these little bottles of ink that you do your little swabs on. If you're looking to just catalog your ink and have it in a convenient notebook, boy, is that a convenient way to go. So I recommend checking that out if you are looking to do some ink swabbing. It's honestly way easier than having to make it up yourself if you like that style of it. So that's worth checking out too. Next question, Jordan says, I have a LAMY Joy with a 1.1 millimeter stub nib, which is what comes on the Joy. It writes well, but it seems to be a drier pen. I have medium nib pens that seem to put more ink down than my LAMY Joy. Am I doing something wrong, or is the LAMY Joy a drier pen? I mean, stub nibs should put a lot of ink on paper, right? I tested the pen with the following inks: Pelikan 4001 Dark Green, Pilot Iroshizuku Yuyake, and Wearingle Dracula. Okay, I don't think you're probably doing anything wrong. Probably, I mean, it's not unusual. The Joy is not like a gushing pen in my experience. To my knowledge, LAMY is using the same feed setup on all their pens, no matter the nib size. So the calligraphy nibs, the 1.1, 1.5, 1.9, they're essentially going to be using those same feeds as what you would have with the finer nibs, I believe. It's just putting down the same amount of ink, but it's basically just spreading it out more. So you're going to get a wider line, but it's not going to be a darker line necessarily. It might even be a little lighter. So I think that's probably part of what you got going on. You got more surface area on the tip of that nib. It's not necessarily flowing more ink out of there. If you have another LAMY, maybe I would try experimenting. I would try taking the nib, the 1.1 that you have on there, swapping it onto your other LAMY and take like a medium nib or whatever that you might have lying around, put it on your Joy, and just see if it's the pen or if it's just the nib or what's going on. Anytime you can switch and swap like that, you'll learn something, especially because LAMY nibs swap so easily. That might help you isolate an issue if there is one, because it definitely could be like, I don't know, that particular nib, the tines could be a little too tight, or maybe there's some like buildup that's happened, whether it's the ink that's like dried up and crusted on there, or there's like some paper fibers or something like that that's kind of gotten in as impeding your flow. It could be that the flow is impeded, and giving it a floss with like a brass sheet, or just a thorough cleaning or something like that might help to kind of flush it back out and get it writing wetter again. That is not super unusual. If you're using one pen a lot over a long period of time, buildup can happen over time. And eventually you get to the point where you're like, I feel like this pen used to write wetter. And then you clean it out, you give it a thorough, rinsing and stuff like that. And you write with it and you're like, oh, that made quite a difference, So that can happen over time, certainly over a series of months or years. If you haven't cleaned your pen thoroughly, that can certainly make a big difference. Writing slower can help too. Anytime, especially if you've got a stub nib or a flex nib or anything like that, whenever you're, increasing the demand of ink on a pen, which a stub nib is going to do that a little bit, slow it down a little bit and give that ink a chance to catch up. And that might make a difference in terms of how dry it feels. You just have to be patient with it. That's all. And then in my experience, Pelikan 4001 inks are very dry. Like those are some of the driest inks I know. That's usually kind of my go-to recommendation for anybody that has a pen that is writing too wet and they want to get it under control. I'll say like use the base Pelikan inks, those 4000 ones, because they are some of the driest around. So that ink I think definitely is not helping your situation. The Iroshizuku Yuyake, that should be okay. That's not a super wet, not a super dry. I think it's kind of middle of the road there. So that's just kind of is what it is. The Wearingle Dracula, that's a shimmering ink. Shimmer inks are going to not flow as well in certain pens because there's physical particulate in there. If you have a really wet writing pen, no problem. It's just going to flow through, not be an issue until maybe over time if it dries out a little bit, or you use it for a while and stuff builds up in there. You got to clean those out a little more regularly. Any shimmer ink in a pen, especially if it gets dried out at any point. But those LAMY feeds, if you've ever had the privilege of taking out one of those LAMY feeds, there's like a lot of really thin lines and parts in there. It's very kind of precise. Wouldn't shock me if maybe sometimes those are not flowing the best with certain shimmering inks. I haven't used Dracula in a LAMY pen to say like, oh, maybe that's it. But it very well could be that some of that particulate kind of just is clogging up the works a little bit. Maybe is a thing. So again, that points back to like maybe give it a thorough cleaning and see if that does anything for you. But if you're using a shimmering ink and it seems to write kind of dry, usually if you just like take off the body and flush it with the converter and just like flood more ink down onto your feed, that will help it to write a little bit wetter, at least for a little bit until it kind of dries up again. And if you just kind of keep doing that over and over again, well, then you get a wetter writing pen, right? And last thing, you can try opening up the tines a little bit. The tines, there's no breather hole. They're pretty like, they're pretty tight on there on those LAMY pens sometimes. They had the breather holes on like their fines and mediums and stuff like that, but not on their calligraphy nibs. So, it might just be that the tines are a little tight, and you're getting into like not buyer beware, but you're do at your own risk. That's what I meant to say. But if you can open up those tines a little bit, might help increase your flow just a tad. So you can do that just by like gently kind of pressing and flexing those tines just a little bit, just to where they start to spread out. Do that gently a few times, see if it increases your flow. Don't like mash it down on there because it's harder to bring it back. But the nibs are relatively inexpensive to replace, so I don't say it's like a huge risk to do that. But if you need to open up those tines just a little bit, just by like, kind of writing like you would in a pull motion, but like flex those tines out a bit, you might be able to open them up and get some increased flow. So, but don't give up on it. I mean, the not super unusual what you're dealing with, but sometimes they can be maybe a little more finicky if you got some really high demand inks. Follow Your Brush says, some of my ink sample vials have ink sticky on the sides when I go to try them in a pen. Even if I gently shake it, it's like a thick consistency. So I don't want to try to ink them in a pen. Is it okay to add a bit of water to dilute the ink? Is it drying in the vial? Is there a solution that I can use to thin it? Yeah, some inks are like that. Some inks definitely seem a little thicker than others. You know, I've got some inks here. Let me show you a couple of what I've got going on. Before I switch over to that though, I'll say, you know, it's definitely possible. I don't know how long you've had these. Really, any of the inks, you know, we do a lot of ink samples around here. There are definitely some inks that are just naturally a little bit thicker, but there's nothing that's like so thick that it's like a different consistency per se. Like some of them just like really are more watery and kind of just slosh around. Others seem to like cling a lot. It doesn't necessarily mean that the ink is thicker though. If it's at the point where it's like globulating and like seems like more of a gel like that, there might be something going on there. Or it could be that if it's not sealed up all the way. You know, I have ink samples that I've had for years sitting here that, well, actually I have some right here that I pulled that aren't that much different than the day that we sampled them. So, you know, yes, technically, at least our vials, they're plastic. Plastic will leach, you know, air, off gas or whatever. It will let some air through over an extended period of time. So yeah, eventually it will dry out a little bit. If that happens though, all the dye and everything else in there is still there. It's still good. So kind of what you were saying, like if you suspect that your ink has maybe had some water evaporate out of it and has gotten thicker, more concentrated, if you add just diluted, or not diluted, if you're trying to dilute it, if you add distilled water, that is what will reconstitute the ink because it's just the water that's evaporated out of there. Everything else that's been mixed into that ink is still in there. So yeah, you can just reconstitute it, add a little bit of distilled water in there, and that will wet it up. Now, I'll say if that's not the case, and you're just adding water to see if it's not going to be as clingy or whatever, that may or may not be necessary. I mean, some people like to thin their inks anyway, just for various reasons. I found that you can usually go like maybe 10%, adding like 10% water to the ink without really noticing anything like visually. When you get to more like 25%, certainly like 50%, that's where it starts to look more watered down. The color is going to be different. It may not flow the same because you're messing with the ratios of everything else that's in the ink. So it's the kind of thing like I would test it in small quantities. I would get yourself, you know, some sample vials or have some spares on hand. Start out with like 2 or 3 milliliters of ink and try adding a little bit of water to it, shaken up. See if you like that better. You know, you can swab it out. You can, you know, dip it, or you could ink it up into a pen. You're not going to cause any harm by adding some distilled water to any ink, you know, shaking it up and then putting it in your pen because it's what's already in there is distilled water. So yeah, let's take a look at some inks, right? Because I want to show you what's normal and what is expected, right? So here we go. I've got a couple of inks here. One that I'm very familiar with is Robert Oster Blue Water Ice. So this one, you know, it's going to cling a little bit up there, especially if the ink's been sitting in here for a while. You know, this one has been sitting there for a while. It's going to hang out a little more where it's been sitting there. The reason that you get some cling on these is because of the adhesion properties of the ink, right? You know, water has its own particular adhesion properties, surface adhesion. You know, that's what's causing it to do that. Different inks will have different adhesive properties, and the type of material too. So like ink sample vials, you know, the plastic that's used in these is going to have one adhesive property, whereas in a pen, you know, like a Swisby Eco, even though it still looks like, you know, it's plastic, who cares? It could behave a little bit differently in here. That's why some inks, like the ink coats the pen more than others, you know, like here I've got my other Eco. This one here, it's been sitting now for like 20, 30 minutes or something like that. It's hard to see on here because it's relatively full, but there's still blue all over this thing. So the ink that I have in here is coating the inside pretty darn good, right? And some inks just do that. I wish I could tell you what ink was in there because I don't remember because it was months ago when I inked it up. And I don't keep good track of that thing. You know, just by comparison, so like you have Blue Water Ice here, which is, you know, relatively flowy, right? It's moving down. Whereas I have Pilot Oro Shizuku Sukiyo, which is known as a very well-behaved ink, very popular ink. that sucker just like coats the inside of the vial and it just hangs out there, right? Why? I have no idea. I couldn't tell you why one of these is doing it and the other one is not, right? But they're both really well-behaved inks and they both flow great and all that. So, just visually, it's not always, the best indicator of what's kind of sticking in a vial as to how it's going to perform in your pen. I wouldn't necessarily worry about that unless it's truly like you got like globs, like kind of slopping around in there. Then I may be like, that's a little sus. But that you could take a Q-tip in there, you could swab it out, see if it seems like thicker or anything unusual. And then I got some others too. These are some older samples, which I got some like old logos on our sample vials here. But let's see here, like Diamine Writer's Blood. This is a pretty popular one. This stuff coats, like it coats completely. Like even though none of the ink is up here anymore, it's still very well coated, right? But it's a very popular ink. It behaves really nicely. Diamine Matador, right? Another Diamine red ink. It's much more flowy, right? Yeah, you got a little bit hanging out there, but really, really not sticking at all. Red Dragon, another really nice red. That's clinging a little bit more, but still relatively non-clingy, not like the Writer's Blood was. And then Ox Blood, okay? So these are all relatively similar, like reds in the same family, the same brand. That one clings like heck, I wouldn't be too afraid of how it's clinging in here. If there's other properties to the ink that are concerning to you, if it smells funny, if it seems like it truly is like globbier, thicker, that kind of a thing, that's where you could try diluting it a little bit. You could always try diluting it just as a test and just kind of see. But, once you dilute it, it's hard to kind of undilute it. But, that could be reassuring to you. If you're still really concerned about it, ink it up in a pen that's easy to clean out, one that you're not like super overly concerned about, not sentimental, not super expensive, and just try it. You might be surprised that it actually flows just fine. And then you just learn a little bit about, what to gauge, but I wouldn't sweat it too much. But that at least gives you an idea kind of what to expect. It's honestly all over the place in terms of how much the ink sticks to inside of the vials, and it's really not correlated with how well the ink behaves in the pen. All right, next question. Ginga Snaps Art says, any recommendations for a workhorse pen which one semi-regularly forgets to put the cap back on? Currently, the most reliable pen I have for work is the Kaweco Sport with platinum carbon ink. Also forgetful. Whoops. Sometimes I leave it posted overnight. Not sure if there's another pen out there which might protest less. Sure, I think. I think the ink that you have in there, the carbon ink, that is a particularly stubborn ink to clean out if it dries, because it is a pigmented ink. So I generally say like pigmented inks, iron gall inks are usually okay for fountain pens, like modern iron gall inks, not the like crazy like dip pen type stuff. But modern iron gall stuff like your TWSBI Blue Black and your, Platinum's got, a couple. I say usually they're going to be okay. Just don't let them dry out in the pen. And that's the same with pigmented ink. So I would maybe not use that ink in there. If you know that this is an issue for you, is that pen going to be the best in terms of not drying out? Not really. It's okay because they don't have like huge feeds with lots of fins and stuff like that, but still it's exposed to air, especially left out overnight. It's very possibly going to dry out and maybe protest and have some things for you. But I think if you use something other than carbon black, then it might not protest quite as much, or it might be a little easier to kind of reconstitute. But I would say Private Reserve Infinity inks might be something worth you taking a look at, because that's sort of what they were designed for. They were designed to be really good about not drying on an open pen. So you don't have to worry about, not necessarily like overnight, but if you're writing with a pen for a long time and not constantly recapping the pen, that it'll be just fine. And it just stays wetter in the pen in general. So that might be something worth trying, especially we got a deal running basically through the rest of the year. Any Monteverde, Conklin, Delta, whatever pen from distributed by Jaffa, who also makes the Private Reserve Infinity inks, you get a free Private Reserve Infinity with a pen that you would buy from them. So anytime between now and the end of the year, if you buy one of the pens, you will get a Private Reserve Infinity ink anyway. So might be worth doing that and then just trying the ink and see if you really like that ink. But you asked about other pens that might be better suited for this type of usage. I don't know that there are any designed for being left uncapped overnight. That's sort of a inherent thing with fountain pens. You know, in order to get the flow that you have with a water-based ink, it sort of needs to not be left to like evaporate overnight. It's kind of just the nature of the beast. But depending on the pen, some will resist that a little better than others. The ones that I think that would perform best would be any kind of hooded nibs. So, you know, anything where there's very little of the nib or feed that's actually exposed. So take a look at your Diplomat Viper. This is a relatively new pen, but that does okay. LAMY 2000 does pretty well like this. This maybe not the one you want to carry around the office, but a Jinhao Shark pen. I don't know about this one. Pilot Vanishing Point or Decimo, not necessarily because it would be great being left out all night, even though it does have a kind of a small nib and feed, I'm not quite sure, but you don't have a cap to worry about. So you can just click it, close. Maybe that will make it easier to remember. You know, you have one of those things, and I'm trying to like see if I have one handy, which I don't, of course. I literally had one before I started shooting the video, and I just realized I put it back in my drawer. Anyway, but you probably know what it is. You click it. Platinum Curidas also does that. LAMY Dialogue, but I wouldn't say, you know, if you're forgetting, you know, that's more of like a intentional having to, you know, sort of cap the thing. I think the click mechanism might make it easier for you to not leave it out like that. You know, and then just if you do need to get it going again in the morning, if you do happen to leave it out uncapped or whatever, you know, the hooded nibs maybe will be a little tougher to kind of do this, but just a more conventional nib. Basically, if you know, just kind of dip it back into the ink that you use, you know, that you inked it up with, that can like resaturate the feed and help get things flowing again. Or, you know, have a cup of water there. That can also help. You know, you then have like kind of watery ink as you get it going, but then it might get it flowing. Anything that's like maybe dried on the nib overnight might help to get it going again. And then if like worst case, if you have the ink there that you inked it up with, if just dipping it's not enough, you can, you know, it's debatable whether you should do this or not. You probably should clean out the pen if it's really not behaving like that. But if you wanted to just dump what you have of the ink, you know, left in the bottle, ink it back up, that would be, you know, essentially sort of flushing the pen with the ink that you had in there. Of course, as I'm saying that, I'm like, yeah, then if you might have like dried up ink flakes and stuff like that you're like putting back into the bottle, it's probably not ideal, but you can make your own decision. You're a grown up, I'm assuming. But anyway, those are all little tips for you. Hopefully some of that is useful. And my last question on this very fountain pen day is from SK Vivian. We'll just go with that. I am new to fountain pens this year. Welcome. And I would like a gold nib at some point because it sounds like a great writing experience. My question is, when going from a steel nib to a gold nib, is there a learning curve or anything that I should know when it comes to gold? So I do get asked about this quite a bit, and usually it's like, what pen should I get? What this, you know, but I thought this is an interesting way to put it. Like, what do I have to know when going to a gold nib? So I think that's a really great question to ask. I would say first thing is don't rush. Yes, a lot of gold nibs can be a nice writing experience, but it's not like every gold nib writes better than every steel nib. And there's nuances to it, right? If you're relatively new to fountain pens and you don't have a feel for a lot of different types of nibs, a lot of different types of ink and different, you know, things like that, it's like anything else. It's like if you don't drink a lot of wine, you know, you can be like, okay, I can taste the difference between like red and white, but I can't taste all the notes for different, you know, flavors and soils and like that kind of stuff. You got to just drink a lot of wine and got to really study it and develop that palate, right? Before you can really appreciate a finer bottled wine. It's kind of the same with fountain pens, right? Like if you've never thought about using pens in your life and you use a fountain pen, you're like, oh, this is a nicer writing experience, kind of law of diminishing returns. Going from like a ballpoint or rollerball to a fountain pen, you're like, oh, wow, this feels really nice. But then going like from, fountain pen to, nicer and nicer fountain pens, you may or may not notice as much of a difference of that in the beginning. So I wouldn't rush. And gold nibs they get really expensive. Gold is extremely expensive. So you're going to pay a lot to take that leap to a gold nib that may or may not be worth it to you at this point. The best thing would be if you know anybody that has any gold nibs, or you happen to have a pen shop or a pen show or anything like that near you. If you have a way to try some different gold nibs, that's the best thing, because then you get to experience it for yourself. So that I would recommend if you can. So let's see here. Not all the gold nibs write the same. I think I mentioned that. In general, all else being equal, gold is a softer material than steel. So if you have two of the exact same nibs, same design, same thickness and everything, and you write with it, the gold one should be a little bouncier, should feel a little softer than the steel. Now, that is not a steadfast rule, because you can thin out steel, make it more flexible. There's certain steel nibs like the Diplomat Magnum, for example, which is actually pretty bouncy and pretty soft for what it is. Noodler's flex nibs, Omniflex, the Conklin Omniflex. There's different steel flex nibs that are designed with like cutouts or holes or thinned out or whatever to be more flexible and springy. And then there's other gold nibs that are really thick and not super bouncy. Platinum in general, Sailor, especially on their 14 carats, not super bouncy. They tend to be pretty stiff. Whereas Pilot, their gold nibs are a little bit softer, a little bit springier. So even within the gold nib kind of realm, it's not always like guaranteed that it's going to be a particular type of experience, right? Which is super great and helpful when you're just starting out, right? Like, oh, awesome. So I get to learn all these nuances of all these different things. So I would say, if you're talking about like, is there a learning curve? A lot of it has to do with like just knowing what to look for. But you don't really have to do anything special when writing with them. I would say the biggest thing is just not pressing too hard. In general, with fountain pens, a properly tuned fountain pen, steel nib or gold nib, really should be able to draw a line just, holding the pen under its own weight. So, if I'm like a piece of paper here, just kind of holding the back of it and just dragging the pen, it should draw a line. So you really don't need to be pressing down as you're writing, especially if you're coming newer to fountain pens from ballpoints or rollerballs. You're used to kind of like mashing it down, and like trying to get it writing and all that. You want to resist that temptation with fountain pens because it's meant to just kind of flow easily. That's kind of the appeal. That's kind of the point. So if you have steel nibs, they're a little more forgiving generally because they're a little stiffer. But if you have some really soft gold nibs and you write with a really heavy hand, you're mashing the thing down, it can actually cause some problems because you can spring those tines, you can kind of wear them out. So that's just something to watch out for. It's not something that like everybody does, but it is just something, just write with a lighter hand when you're using a gold nib, generally speaking. Another thing, yes, you're looking at gold nibs, but as you notice, you start looking at pens with different gold nibs and you're like, well, some are 14 karat, some are 18 karat, 21 karat. What does all this mean? Like most other things in fountain pens, it depends. Again, all else equal, exact same nib, exact same design, everything. A 14 karat nib is going to have a slightly lower gold content than an 18 or a 21 karat. So the higher the gold content and the less of the other metals, the softer it should be because gold is a softer metal. So a 14 karat nib generally should be a little stiffer, whereas an 18 karat would be a little softer, 21 karat even more so. That said, you get different thicknesses, you get different designs and the curvature and stuff like that. So just a nib saying it's 14, 18, or 21 karat, you can't say that's going to be softer, that's going to be less soft, which is super great and not confusing at all, right? There really is no like super objective measurement for softness of a nib, unfortunately. So that said, it's also kind of funny because there's a lot of 18 karat nibs that are kind of naturally soft, but 18 karat nibs, generally speaking, are actually a little too soft to thin out and make into flexible nibs. So actually you'll see a lot of 14 karat nibs like the Pilot Falcon, for example, or certain other ones like Scribo. So Scribo has regular 18 karat nibs, but their extra flexible nibs are actually 14 karat because they need a slightly stronger metal to be able to withstand the additional like thinning and stuff like that they do to make them flexible. So it's like on those instances, the 14 karat is actually much more flexible because of the other things they've done to it. So yeah, it's confusing. I get that, but I got a couple of recommendations for you for ones that would be good to take a look at as somebody newer to it. I've actually done 2 videos on this over the years that would easily be good recommendations. One I did from 2016, top 5 entry-level gold nibs. And then I did an update to that video in 2021 called Top 5 Entry-Level Gold Nibs 2021. So I have 10 different pens recommended in there. I would say just as a blanket statement, we'll try to link to those. As a blanket statement, Pilot E95S, Pilot Falcon, Pilot Custom 74. Those are really good gold nibs that will feel soft, feel like this is a good introduction to gold nibs. And they're all on the more affordable end of gold nibs. So those ones are really good standard kind of intro pens. So take a look at those ones if you are seriously considering doing it, and you won't really go wrong. Well, there you go. That's what I got for questions this week. I'm going to go a little bit long because it's fountain pen day. So I'm going to give you some extra little treats here. Some of my adventures, I've gotten a lot of people asking about like, hey, I miss you talking about what's going on in your personal life and all this kind of stuff. And, I'm trying to be more measured about what I share and what I don't, given my recent experiences. But I've been up to a few things that I think are kind of interesting. So I just thought I would open up a little bit and share with you all. First, I mentioned last week a mental health half day. I had an interesting one. Basically, I was doing a video shoot and I kind of knew in the back of my mind, I was like, this is probably going to run long because I was trying to shoot 4 videos in one day, which not only is like, you got to do all the prep and all that and actually shoot the face shots of the videos, but then all the B-roll and the supplemental stuff to then kind of weave in after the fact. That's a whole bunch more stuff. I ended up basically being here all day, like a normal work day. But, it is good for my mental health to have some videos in the can for you guys. So, I still kind of view that as a mental health. It wasn't like downtime necessarily, but I really enjoy making videos. And when I can have ones that I've been prepping for a long time and actually record them and get them rolling, that actually felt pretty good. So that was how I spent my mental health. No one else here was working, so that's good. And then had some crazy adventures here. This is more of like an office related one, but so we rent in our building here. So earlier this year, like early summer, they were like digging up all in the parking lot in front of our building, working on like some pipes and stuff like that. I think it was the gas lines. I think they were redoing the gas lines or something like that. Okay, fine. So we have, electric air conditioning units here because we're in Central Virginia. So it's like pretty moderate climate, but it gets hot in the summer and cold in the winter. So we have natural gas heating, but electric cooling. So what happened is now that it's getting a little bit colder, we would come in the mornings and it would be like 64, 65 degrees. And it's like, ooh, this is a little cold. It's got a little bite to it. We normally try to set it a little higher than that. But it was kind of like across the building. And I was like, And we have 12 different HVAC units to manage this building. It's a lot to keep track of. But when it's like kind of like across the building, if there's like a given unit that's not up to snuff, it'll be kind of off from the rest of them. But it was kind of like across the board. But then it would get warmer in the afternoon and it would kind of warm up a bit. But this was like a pattern over several days. And I was like, something else is going on here. And we'd never had this happen before like this. Turns out, when they did the digging work, this was in like May or June or something like that, months ago. Understandably, the reason I'm assuming it's gas lines is because our gas was shut off. Did they communicate this to us? No. So not only did they shut off the gas, but they put a lock on our gas meter. So we found out. So we had called our landlord, the property manager. We called our HVAC technicians. We didn't know exactly what was going on, but we were like, I don't think the heat's working. And it wasn't like so bad because it was only getting cold at night. So it's not like we're in like the deep winter and we're like having to worry about like ink freezing and stuff like that. It's nothing like that. But it was definitely a little bit of like, you know, that like Spider-Man meme where it's like two Spider-Mans like pointing at each other. It was kind of like that with everybody being like, you know, property managers being like, well, the HVAC tech should do this. And HVAC tech was like, there's no gas coming in. They got a lock on the thing. You got to call the Department of Utilities. And we called Department of Utilities and they're like, well, no, that your gas is turned on. It's not a thing. And so it was a lot of just like running around, stuff like that. So eventually, turns out it was Department of Utilities. They literally had a lock on the meter. They came in, unlocked it, relit the pilot lights. Now we have heat again. So that's fun. Just the adventures that we have in the building. That was like a 2-week saga that we had going back and forth between all those different people. But thankfully, I got a great team. Very helpful with that. So that was fun. Let's see here with my kids. We've been watching Parks and Recreation. My kids are older now. They're like, gosh, my daughter is going to be 13 pretty soon. My son's going to be 15. So right now they're 12 and 14. So we're starting to be able to watch like actual entertaining shows that we like to watch. Because Rachel and I, we don't watch like crazy stuff anyway, but we like to watch a lot of like comedies and, you know, like Parks and Recreation. So my kids have been watching that and I've been having an absolute blast. Boy, I love that show. I forgot how much I love it. We've watched it through several times. They're really loving it. We're midway through season 5 right now. So that's pretty fun. And they're just enjoying it. We also got that new Super Mario Party game, Super Mario Party Jamboree, which is cool because, I mean, gosh, Rachel and I, we've been together 20, how many years now? We were 17 when we met, 23 years. So we've been playing Mario Party games like for decades together. Pretty fun. So Mario Party Jamboree is really fun because they have a lot of like old boards and old mini games and stuff that they had in previous versions of games that we haven't played in forever. So it's been really fun. However, I'm terrible at this game. Like I am so bad. And I'm realizing now like, oh, my kids are better at video games than me. And Rachel, she kind of always has been better at video games than me, but especially like those types of games, she just beats the heck out of me, like Mario Kart and all that kind of stuff. I was like, oh, I'm the worst video game player in my family. So when we play Mario Party together, I'm just like, I have to like really like die unto myself and let my ego go because it's like young Brian playing a lot of video games. That was a long time ago. Really has not kept up to snuff there. So it's like, yeah, I'm gonna let the family have fun. And it's like whenever they, you know, somebody needs to steal a star or steal coins or whatever, I'm like, just take it from me. It keeps the fights down. You know, it's like, oh, it's just kind of fun. So I found that like just taking that role, I actually have more fun because then I'm not frustrated about losing as much. But my kids have more fun because they legitimately are beating me, but then I'm not like being all bent out of shape about it. So that's been a fun sort of experience for me, and the kids are having a blast. So that's been cool. Also, I've been playing more bass guitar. I picked that back up again relatively recently, and I changed the strings because I played bass guitar a long time ago, but I didn't really I never had lessons. I was very self-taught, and the internet was not what it is now. There was no YouTube back then when I was playing it previously. So, you know, all I knew was like you get a bass and you play it. But a friend of mine who plays bass guitar told me about flat wound strings. I'd never heard of this. I didn't know this was a thing. If you're a jazz bassist or anything like that, you'll know. But anyway, I won't get all nerdy into it because if you're not if you don't play these instruments, you're going to be like, who cares, Brian? But with regular bass guitar strings, they're like ribbed. They have like a texture to them, you know? So when you're sliding your fingers up and down, it's like a cheese grater, just like tearing up your fingers sometimes. Especially if you like to do lots of slides and walking and bass lines and stuff like that. So I heard about these flat wound strings. They're incredible. They're like smooth. So totally changed my life in terms of playing bass. However, the thickness of these strings is slightly different. So what happened was the spacing of the strings was not the same as my old strings. So on my bass, like I was getting like some like chatter on the frets and stuff like that. And it just like wasn't sitting right. So, I was getting kind of frustrated, but I was like, I know things. I know how to fix stuff. Let me watch some YouTube videos about how to like adjust, your guitar and your bass and stuff like that. And oh my gosh, like I'm learning so much. There's a thing called a truss rod. It's not just like a piece of wood on that neck. There's actually like a metal rod that goes all the way through that you can tighten and loosen, because as the strings on the guitar are pulling, basically, it's like wanting to bow the neck. It's putting pressure on it like that. So you have this metal truss rod that helps to like straighten it back out. And the adjustment of that truss rod helps you like to bend it. So if you have an issue with it like slapping too much of the strings, you can actually like loosen that truss rod or tighten that truss rod to get it more aligned. I didn't know any of this stuff, and I'm just YouTubing it and I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, you can just learn so much now. So I had pretty good success with it. I tuned up my truss rod. I adjusted the like bridge barrels and all this kind of stuff, stuff that I never really knew to do. And my bass plays so much better now. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Like I could have like taken it somewhere and gotten it done or whatever, but it's like, I wouldn't have learned anything. So I thought that was so cool. Just like taking the time, learning how to do it myself. And now I can tune my own bass and guitar. So that was kind of fun. Thank you, YouTube. It's always great when I like get to find some other aspect of YouTube where people are doing like educational content. Cause I'm like, I do this all day long with fountain pens, but when I'm a total noob at something else and I discover somebody who's just like broken things down step by step, I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. And I'm like, oh, this is how people feel about my pen videos. Like, oh, that's amazing. Cause like I make these videos, but it's like to experience that firsthand for myself in some other area of my life. That's where I'm like, yeah, let me shoot more videos. Like this is so motivating to just be able to share this with people. So that's kind of cool too. Also, I had a friend that moved this past weekend, needed to move, pretty decent move, like 30-minute drive away. I mean, not like cross country or anything, but they're moving across town, needed to drive. They had a ton of friends help. I mean, there were probably 30 or 40 of us there. It was kind of amazing. And I have not moved in a while, this is a younger friend, they're moving more. That's cool. But they got kids and they had this big play set. And when I asked like, how can I help? So I have a 20-foot flatbed trailer because I have to haul my tractor around sometimes. So I have this flatbed trailer. And he was like, yeah, you need to bring the flatbed trailer because we want to move the play set. And I'm thinking, okay, it's like the swings and the tower and all this kind of stuff, big slide, multiple slides on this thing. So we get there and he's like, I'd really like to move it in one piece if we can, because there wasn't an easy way to kind of detach and disassemble this thing. And I was like, this thing is like, I don't know, 11, 12 feet high, like 18 feet long of sorts. Not as like wide. So it actually was pretty conducive to fit on this trailer, but I was like, how are we going to get this thing on there? So we like, like Amish barn raising style, just a bunch of boards that put through, and there were like 8 guys that like lifted this thing up and put it onto this trailer. So I had this I got a picture of it. I had this entire play set on my trailer and I had to drive like a half an hour, on these like back roads and stuff. Like thankfully, like was in the country, moving to a different part of the country. So I wasn't on like any busy roads or anything like that, but I was like power lines and tree branches. I was kind of concerned a little bit. But I knew that like big rigs, like Mack trucks type things, I think it's usually like 13 feet, 8 inches, I think is like the clearance you need for like, low hanging bridges and stuff like that. We didn't have any bridges to worry about, but, that was kind of the number I had in mind, was like 13 feet, 8 inches. Well, we measured it once it was on my trailer. It was like 13 feet 2, 13.4, something like that. And I was like, okay, like I felt better knowing that I was at least under 13.8, but I was sweating it a little bit as I was driving it. But I had all the straps, I had it all down, and honestly, it went great. Like everything was fine. It didn't feel like precarious or anything because we really strapped it down good. But that was an adventure. I've never moved anything that physically big, driving it down the road. And it was all contained within the trailer. It wasn't like, I know enough, I don't have like my CDL or anything like that, but I know enough of like when you need to have like special lights and all the special things, going down the road. And I was within that. It just felt like a really big thing, but I didn't come close to hitting like anything. It was just a hair raising experience. So that was kind of fun, a little adventure. And then last but not least, it's Halloween this week. It will have already happened by the time y'all are seeing this, but it hasn't happened yet as I'm recording this. I'm recording this on Tuesday afternoon. So I don't know. My kids are at this weird age. I think my daughter is still going to go trick-or-treating. She's got this like group costume with her friends that she's done. My son is like going to a party. He wasn't going to, it's more like a hangout, with his friends because they're like, it's not really cool to trick-or-treat anymore, but he still wants to hang out with his friends. So they're doing a thing. He wasn't going to do a costume, but, because they're doing like a hangout thing, now he's doing a costume because a lot of other people have it. So they put that together. So I was like, I think I'm going to end up going trick-or-treating with my daughter and her friends. Excuse me. So it's like, do I do a costume? But we're doing like a little thing here in the office, like a little costume thing. So I was like, maybe I'll do that. But I just never have great ideas for costumes. But I had a good one this year because I picked up the saxophone again. I was like, and we're watching Parks and Recreation. I was like, I could go as Duke Silver. I have a suit. I have a saxophone. I don't want to like walk around outside with that because that would be kind of annoying. So I'm not sure I'll dress up for the actual trick-or-treating because it's going to be dark anyway. But for around the office, I might do that. But I just need to get a fedora and a fake mustache. I've known this. I've had this idea for months. Have I done it? No. So we're going to see in the next 2 days if I actually pull that off. So if I have the costume and pull it together, I'll take a picture and I'll share it with you all. But if I don't, then you'll know that I just had a lot going on and didn't prioritize getting my costume together. And I will go as boring nothingness, or I'll pull something, I'll go as the brawny man and just wear like jeans and a flannel shirt and carry around a roll of paper towels. I have done that before. Anyway, that's what I've got going on. So hope you all enjoyed little insights into my life. As you see, I'm still up to crazy adventures. This is kind of just what I do. Anyway, we'll go ahead and wrap this thing up here. Just want to thank you for watching. Please, I'm really enjoying the feedback, getting some great comments on it. So yeah, just let me know how I'm doing with these and ask me more questions because I'm literally like pulling the questions that y'all are asking in the previous Q&As as I'm like building up my question like bank. So yeah, if you ask questions, pretty good chance I might answer it. Check out gouletpens.com. We're self-sponsored here. So fountain pen, ink, and paper. If at this point you've watched this and you haven't gone there yet, check out the fountain pen deals. If it's assuming it's not past November 3rd. And let's see here. I have a writing prompt and a fun fact. So my writing prompts, okay, because we got some feedback that like some people like that. So writing prompts for you this week. Write out one word for each letter of the alphabet with your fountain pen. So like start with A, pick a word that starts with A and write that. Then go with B, a word that starts with B. Just do that through the whole alphabet, whatever word you want, And then if you want an additional challenge, repeat it, but with different words using your non-dominant hand. So if you're right-handed, try it with your left hand. If you're left-handed, try it with your right hand and just see what comes up. You could write the same thing and just see how different it looks and how crazy. Or you could pick a different word if you want to exercise your brain a little bit more. So that's my writing prompt for this week. If you're so inclined, and it's Fountain Pen Day, what the heck? Give it a shot. Okay, and then my fun fact for you, since it is literally just like we will have just had Halloween by the time this goes out. So it's estimated that in 2024, Americans will spend more than $11 billion on Halloween, with over $3.5 billion of that on candy alone. That's a lot of frickin' candy. The cost of Halloween candy has also been rising steadily. Last October, the price of Halloween candy in the U.S. was 13% higher than it was the previous year. So 2023, it was 13% higher than 2022, and it's gone up even more this year. This year, Halloween spending is projected to break previous records, with half of shoppers planning on spending more than $51 on candy this season. And for reference, in 2023, last year, Americans spent an average of $31.93 on Halloween candy. Now, some of that is like people are just spending more money on candy. Some of it is inflation and higher cost of candy. So, why are prices so high? This is kind of interesting. The price of chocolate skyrocketed in 2024 due to some supply chain disruptions and damaging weather conditions. So cocoa, which is a key ingredient in chocolate, reached an all-time high in April, with the price nearly tripling from January to June. So that's part of why candy prices are increasing. It's not just people inflating for various reasons. Also, I think like sugar increased a lot because that, came from Brazil, which has been really rainy. And so a lot of the crops didn't yield right or something like that. I don't know. there's all kinds of like weather related stuff that impacted the crop yield, which then impacts the cost of the materials that go into all these candies. So that's part of it. So crazy interconnected world we live in. But yeah, people love them some Halloween candy, let me tell you. So there you go. That's what I got for Q&A this week, a Halloween/fountain pen day one. Hope you've enjoyed this. But I really appreciate you sticking in the video this long, and keep on watching, and I'll keep on answering your questions. I'm really enjoying this, and hope you have a great start to your November. I cannot believe it's November already, which is crazy. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and right on.